Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Board of Police Services Board, and to our policing services members that are here this morning, and our guests, and to the media, and those who are at home watching. I welcome you to the resurrection, or the first meeting of the fall for the Police Services Board. And get some minor business out of the way first and foremost. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest from any member of the board? Seeing none. We will have an added item to the agenda under other business, and that's a presentation of some money that was made through the auctions that the OPP host and hold. And we'll get that out of the way as well under other business. We do have a closed session as usual to discuss operational issues with the OPP, and that will happen at the end. Just prior to the closed session, the media would like to speak to me about the presentation this morning that we're going to make almost immediately. We don't have any ceremonial activities at this point. I should add under other business, if you don't mind, board members, the Zone 4 meeting that's coming up, and just have a quick reference around the table as to who might be attending that meeting in Niagara on the Lake, is it, or Niagara Falls? Down there somewhere. And for everyone else who may be listening, we want to get back on schedule, so I'm proposing, we'll be proposing to the board for their approval or refusal that we get back our regular meetings Wednesday, the 24th of September. Yeah. The fourth Wednesday, whatever that is, right? I think it's the 24th. So we'll get back to that. 25th, Joe? Thank you. So we'll get back on schedule with that, and I will be away for the month of October, so the deputy chair will be taking over that meeting in October. David, that's for you. All right. Thank you. So, item number 4, presentations and deputations. I had Owen send out the, as an attachment to your agenda, the presentation this morning on a false alarm policy. What that will entail will be working with staff to revise the bylaw that exists. It's a PSB bylaw, but it's issued under Norfolk County. It was originally designed and drafted back in the regional government days, and I know that only because I helped them draft it with my experience in that business. And then it was revised when Norfolk came into being as Norfolk County present. Again, I assisted in the drafting of it, so I'm familiar with it. Then I started to hear some interesting news that first came out of Toronto on how they're dealing with false alarms, and then more recently Hamilton is now jumping on board with that. I talked to Guelph, and I've talked to a number of others who are contemplating moving in that direction. Where it's important to us will be certainly where the Ontario Provincial Police are the policing service for particularly rural Ontario and the calls for service. And well, that's one of the ambitions, is to reduce that. Another ambition is, of course, to use police services to their best possible ability, and that's to not chase after false alarms. So if you want to pull the deck out and have a look at it, the first slide will, I assume everybody has that attached to your minutes. Okay. Do you have one? Okay. So if you go to the very first slide, why would we move in this direction? To stop the unnecessary responses, to save police time for more important and higher priority issues, reduce the calls for service, and reduce policing calls through that process. I did mention to you that the Toronto Police Service has already moved in this direction, and the Hamilton Police Service have already moved into this approach. And the approach fundamentally is to respond only to verified alarms. And there is a definition of verified. And it certainly puts the onus on the monitoring stations to verify the alarm. So if the monitoring station cannot verify that either by a video or somebody on the scene actually seeing it happen or any other means, an audio device, multiple zone activities in the building, if they can't verify it, they choose whether to call the police service or not. In most cases, they will choose not to unless it's verified and deal with the key holder or the owner of the alarm system. If they do decide that they wish to have the police dispatched and it turns out to be a false alarm, there's a penalty to pay. It's as simple as that. If you want to jump forward to slide number 9, I don't know if they're numbered or not, but it's the benefits of adopting a similar policy. About 4 from the back. And the calls for service will dramatically drop for false burglar alarms. That's first and foremost. We do know that 97% of burglar alarms are false. 97%. And for a long time, we've been chasing after those and paying the premium for it. So fewer calls will be made to the OPP communications or dispatch. Fewer time-consuming responses would be made by the OPP officers. Fewer calls for service means officers spend more time on crime prevention and law enforcement, which are the number 1 and number 2 priorities under the Police Services Act. And fewer calls for service translates into savings to the municipality. And in 2018, there were 786 alarm calls. Let me repeat that, 786 alarm calls. That's an average of 66 a month. And when I finish this little presentation, I'm going to invite Bill Cridlin and Nikki Sloat, who are here from Community Services. They're the ones who administer the bylaw and the false alarm program that's in place currently. And I'll have a few questions for them, and I'm sure you may as well. Then the next slide is next steps. Everything in between these slides is basically what the Toronto Police Service do. But next steps. Norfolk County staff, members of the Police Services Board who wish to participate, and the OPP officers communicate with the contacts, and that's the very last slide, and any others, and get a clear outline of the program, the required administration, and its benefits. The Norfolk Police Services Board and county staff will submit a report no later than December 31st. It could be earlier, but no later than December 31st of this year for approval and selected implementation date. Norfolk County and the Police Services Board work with the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards to inform other OPP municipalities of the policy. And why I say OPP municipality, again, because the calls for service, we'll get this verified this morning when we have the municipal policing people here. we are billed a percentage of all the calls for service across Ontario that the OPP make. And I just need some clarification that does not include the provincial service side of the equation, but certainly calls for service. And we're billed 3.3%. And as we look and drill down, we know what that cost is. So if we can get other OPP serviced municipalities to also go to a program similar to this, calls for service will drop across Ontario, and we'll have better policing as a result. The ask that I will be, if the board approves, have council give direction to staff to work with the Police Services Board to revise the current bylaw, to draft an alarms policy, and for implementation no later than 31st of January 2020. That will be the ask. And the last slide is contacts that I've been working with over the last 3-4 months. So, again, there's very little sense in responding to false alarms. We know that 97% of alarms are false. If we put the onus on the monitoring station to verify the alarm, they will then bear the brunt of making that call. And this will not be foreign to them, because they already do it now for Toronto and Hamilton. In Guelph, they do something very similar. So, as I say, it will not be foreign to them. Are there any questions at this point on this presentation? Sound like a good thing to do? Joe?
If I could just comment from an OPP perspective,
Yep.
This would be a totally new policy for the OPP, and therefore it would require corporate approval, because of course there would be some liability should we not respond to a call.
Okay, well, let me ask you a question. If the monitoring station doesn't call you, what's your liability?
Well, and that's right, but there's a lot of working parts to this, and
Yep.
just quickly reviewing the Toronto
Yep.
Police Policy, who have a whole unit dedicated to alarm response and administration.
Oh, well, great.
Yeah, exactly, which we don't have. Again, we'd have to examine it, see how it impacts our communication center, our call takers, our response, et cetera. So from my perspective, it would require a business note that I have to do to put up through the chain of command and get corporate approval.
Okay, and I'll certainly work with you on that.
This is new. So
Yep.
whether January 31st, 2020 is a reasonable deadline in my world, I'm not so sure of that, but we'll see.
Well, I appreciate those viewpoints and the comment. Where I'm coming from, if Norfolk County and its corporate decision-making says, we're changing, then, we'll have to change.
Yeah, that's fine, but if the call doesn't come into the communication center, then obviously we won't respond, but if a
Yep.
call does come in,
Yep.
our policy is we will respond whether verified, non-verified.
Mhm.
I don't know how many alarm, because we have quite a few alarms that aren't monitored by a company.
Mhm.
So anyhow, from my perspective, there's a lot of work to do on my end before it would all go forward on the OPP side.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And we'll certainly work with you to go through the chain of command and get things settled. Bill, Nikki, one of you want to come up here and for a moment? David.
Why Nikki's coming up. Through the chair, do the police know how many alarms that aren't monitored? Is therefore it's just a noise and the neighbors call it in?
There's quite a few alarms that come in like that, especially in the rural areas, because a lot of the tobacco kilns are alarmed, and quite often we'll get dispatched to an alarm that's sounding an audible alarm. It's not monitored by anybody, it's just going off and a neighbor calls it in or somebody passing by.
In today's world of electronics, we're now, with the satellite systems and everything that's available, the cameras that are available, almost requesting people to have a viewing alarm. I think we're almost at that point. I mean, we're just 2 generations away from having a chip in your wrist instead of you carrying a wallet. So why can't we monitor these alarms, or tell people that if they want to have an alarm, let's monitor it through viewing?
I absolutely agree that I wish they were all monitored, but I don't know of any way to force people to have the monitoring company. And again, if we get a call for service come into our communication center, it's a call for service gets dispatched. There's a liability if we don't respond.
Anyone else? Okay, so, excuse me, Nikki Sloat is a very important cog in the whole wheel of Community Services Division. She has been involved in the administration of the current bylaw and previous bylaws. So just some questions for you, Nikki. If Norfolk County in its wisdom were to move in this direction, what would be the impact on your workload administratively?
Through you. It would lighten our load immensely. Right now, the current system seems to be very cumbersome. There's a lot of tracking, there's a lot of database management, there's a lot of invoicing. It's tracked property by property, number of alarms for each property, whether they're a registered alarm or not a registered alarm. This system seems to be so much easier and would definitely lighten our load from an administrative perspective.
And you mentioned registered alarms. How many do you know off the top of your head?
In 2018, we had 107
Registered alarms.
registered alarm properties. Actual alarms in 2018, or of the at-fault false alarms, was 250 in total, 229 in 2017, and so far in 2019, we're at 272.
And the benefit of being a registered alarm is what?
It reduces the value of the invoice per occurrence.
And if, again, Norfolk County in its wisdom were to move to this new process and register only alarm monitoring stations and not the alarm itself, the alarm system itself, what would be the impact on your administrative work?
Again, it would greatly reduce. I mean, if we're registering 107 properties now, if it was only the alarm system or the alarm companies, I think in Norfolk County, we'd probably be looking at anywhere from 6 to 12, possibly.
Okay. Any other questions for Nikki from the board members? Any? Carol?
It's not really a question, and it's not really for you, but I'm just wondering about, so they're registered, and so these alarms that aren't registered, if we move toward this policy, it would render them useless.
Excuse me. If the alarm is monitored, not the tobacco kilns or anything else that's out there, but if the alarm is monitored through the contacts that we have with the CANASA, the Canadian Alarm and Security Association in Canada, and through the Association of Police Services Boards, the monitoring stations will know, I'm in Norfolk County and I'm monitoring 1, 2, 20 alarms, whatever, then they will know that they have to register with Norfolk County. And there will be a fee for that registration, as there is now currently a fee for registration. And then they would be well informed of this approach, this policy in the new bylaw. Any new ones coming on also through CANASA would be informed of this new approach. So Patrick Straw and Fred, who's both the executive directors of those associations, I've spoken to both of them at length. This is the future. It certainly is. Did I answer your question?
It did, and the information is good. I'm just thinking of those people that have purchased alarms that aren't connected, into any sort of database, that aren't registered, who will lose the value of their alarm, really.
I don't see that. If it's a false alarm, it's a false alarm. Even when I was in the business, I tried to move to a position whereby the alarm system owner and the key holders that they nominated were the first point of contact in every regard. Then a decision was made by them, not by the monitoring station. Do you want the police called? And invariably, the answer would be no. It's because of the cat or low maintenance, some spiders got into the sensor, those types of things, or I pushed the wrong buttons, because a lot of it is user fault. That's for darn sure. Nikki can regale us with a story of an alarm over in Simcoe that goes off quite regularly, and it's owner operator fault. And So if we can weed that stuff out of the system, the better off we're going to be. And as I said, move the dedicated resources to more serious and priority issues. But the law is that no alarm can be directly dialed into the police services. That's the law. You cannot be directly dialed in. So if there's an alarm system in your neighbor's house and it's going off and going off, it's going to become a nuisance. Not so much a police issue, it's going to be a bylaw issue. You know, get your monitoring, get it monitored, get onto the monitoring system, get into the policy in the program. So I'd like to bump a lot of those into that program if we can. Okay, David?
Mr. Chair, just a comment that our OPP call for a false alarm, it's in a residential section, the monitor, depending on the age, I don't know what percentage of people call a cell phone. I like the 2 contacts, and they should be contacted first, and if they're not able to be contacted because they don't have cell phones, I think that number is very low. And if they say, well, call the police, then the onus is on them. But I think there should be 2 contacts for every alarm, especially in the residential, for all the false ones. You know, some of them aren't working properly. I know of one not too recently. I talked to somebody that his alarm went off, and the police were called, and when the police got there, they even put their hand on the door, and the alarm went off, and the gentleman happened to pull in the driveway and said, oh yeah, it hasn't been working for a couple of days. They're going to come and fix it. Well, no, that's a call for service that didn't need to be.
Yep. Thank you. You're all set? Anything you want to add to it? To what you've heard so far, Nikki?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, I think your presentation is wonderful, and I think the system, I've read the Toronto policy, and I believe that from our perspective administratively,
Yep.
it seems like it would be something that would be very worthwhile.
Okay, and what I would like, if I can, is to get board's approval to make a presentation to council, the next council coming up, 17th, and I have a motion to that effect, but I look forward to working with you and the OPP, and we can perhaps save resources and shift resources to a large extent, not just here in Norfolk County, but perhaps across Ontario.
Great, thanks.
The world is changing. Thank you very much. Bill, thank you very much for coming this morning. I guess you got to get in the back room, do you? Okay. So I need a mover and a seconder to make the presentation. David? Carol? The Police Services Board, get the right one here, sorry. There it is. The Police Service Board endorses Chair Trevali's presentation of Norfolk County Council regarding a false alarm bylaw and policy, and requests that the presentation be scheduled for September the 17th, 2019 with the county clerk. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you, Karen. You can fill in the blanks there, Owen. Thank you. I look forward to working with you on this, Joe and John. Is Jim gone now?
No, he's just currently on vacation. He
Oh, okay.
doesn't retire until October the 25th.
Oh, okay. Thank you. And then we're waiting for the OPP Municipal Policing Bureau to come at 10 o'clock, so we'll continue on through the agenda as much as we can. Approval and correction of Police Services Board minutes from June the 26th. Are there any errors, omissions, or corrections required to those minutes? If not, we'll deem them as being approved. Owen, thank you very much. We can do that. Mover and a seconder. There we go. Your worship and Carol. Normally it's just a procedural thing. Okay, then we go on to business arriving from the minutes. There's just too much history coming forward here. And you got good service through the drive-through. Business arising from the minutes, we have correspondence. There was no business arising from the minutes. We have correspondence, the Community Policing Committee Chairs meeting of June the 20th, 2019. There will be follow-on from that, but it was a very good meeting. I think we had great discussion about what the community policing groups are and cannot and will not be doing, the troubles and difficulties they're having with respect to recruiting. Some of the issues also become procedural in that if they want to reach out and partner, let's say with a service club, Lions, Rotary, whatever it might be, all of a sudden current policies kick in and those volunteers have to be screened and police check done and all of that kind of stuff. So the service clubs basically just back away a bit and say, well, you know, we're doing our own thing, so we're not going to join you on Lock It or Pocket, or we're not going to join you on the bike rodeo, because it's more procedural work than it's worth for us at this point. Those are just examples, but and I may be over embellishing it a bit, but that's the bottom line. And so we're going to meet again. Do we have a date on that one? 19th of September? Okay, so we're going to meet again with these folks, and that'll go out in a missive to you all, and just find out what their thinking is, because we did send them away to contemplate what the discussion brought forward. And some of the suggestions, at least one of them was, maybe we just need an umbrella organization out there at this point, a very strategic one, and that can dip down and assist with certain projects or programs as they occur. We'll see how they feel about that. We do, I say we do, Norfolk County does fund their activities, so there is a budget item that has to be addressed as well. And the inspector was very generous, and his staff very generous in providing us with a list of all the activities that they're engaged in the community as well. So what we're seeing is where it might be falling off on the volunteer and the community policing committee side, certainly the OPP and the policing through their community outreach program is picking up some of that stuff. Certainly they don't do the Lock It and Pocket or the bike rodeo, but they may have staff there or assist with them. And there usually is a representative to each of those committees and those boards. So thank you for that, Joe. That was a quite extensive list of the outreach and engagement in the community. And that was shared with you in the minutes of the last meeting, I believe. Any comment on that? So there will be a missive notice that will go out to let you know the date of that. Norfolk County Council Police Priorities Update. You would have received a copy of an email or a memorandum from me to Norfolk County Council and her worship and the council about reminding them that during the presentation I made previously, we were looking for them to give us their priorities, and those priorities, as they come from the council, will inform whatever policies and strategic plan that we put together here at the Police Services Board, working with our policing service. So what we want to see is a harmonious meshing of council's desires, wishes, wants, and needs with actual activities, what we're doing. So we'll have that discussion as a separate meeting at some point in the near future. We also received from our policing service the new OPP fee schedule. A very quick read. It had no impact on our volunteers at this point, but for some folks there will be increases in certain services that are provided, such as background checks, records checks, those types of things. Cops for Cancer fundraising barbecue, motion to confirm that donation. We'll need a motion, Owen. Dave, you were involved in this. You want to give us a bit of background?
support, but then I turned around and had that list from our OPP of all the community events that the officers put their time into and are involved in, and I thought, this is one of their projects, and I just thought we should support it. We have some funds to be able to support it, so just put the motion forward that we support that funds for cancer through the OPP for $200.
Okay, and then I just found it in the meeting package. There is a motion there. The donation was $200, I believe,
Yes.
and we did a virtual vote around the table pending this meeting to formalize it. And I need a mover and a seconder. Carol, David? Police Services Board confirmed the $200 donation from the proceeds from crime account to Cops for Cancer fundraising barbecue held on the 22nd of July, 2019. All in favor? Thank you very much. There you go, Owen.
And just a note on that, they were quite thankful to receive a check of that amount. They were really, really pleased.
Yeah.
At least I can say.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to drop in a bit earlier than you arrived, and I had a good chat with everybody who was there and made my own personal donation. Although I'm not a kid, I am a cancer survivor. Then we have another letter to deal with, and that's Paddle for Pedals. Is anyone familiar with this organization? Hmm? And again, it's a request for funding, a donation of some sort, and I just want to get the board's feeling on this issue of looking at the areas that are listed in the Police Services Act and the subsequent legislation to repeal that act and replace it. And the list fundamentally doesn't change in that crime prevention and law enforcement are the top two issues, and then it gets into the supporting victims of crime. So do we see these kinds of things fitting in our mandate, or can we use our funds that we have and some more that we're going to get this morning and hopefully have another discussion about proceeds of crime legislation? You know, should those dollars be invested in crime prevention and law enforcement, frontline tools? And you already would have received a copy of an email that I sent to Inspector Varga about talk to your staff sergeants and contemplate what frontline tools you might want to have that we can fund or supply to address those two issues of crime prevention and law enforcement. So I just don't want us to get inundated all of a sudden with letters of requesting donations for this, that, and the other. I don't mind getting them, and I probably phrased that wrong. It's just they got to fit into what we do as a business, right? So on the one that Paddle for Pedals, anybody got any comment or question? We just want to let it die on the vine, or do we want to say, no, we're not going to do it, or do we want to say, yes, we want to do it? David?
Through to the chair, even the cancer one was a little off what we do, but again, it was supporting the people that do the crime, prevent crime prevention. Very slippery slope
Yeah.
on this. Maybe it looks like there's community service people involved. I don't know if you know of this. Can you comment on this, Carol?
Well, what I was just thinking was because I do work for the Norfolk Association for Community Living, I might not be able to vote on this particularly. But what I can say about this organization is it's a good initiative to help people who might not, who don't have driver's licenses, who use bicycles for transportation. It raises money to help purchase those bikes for people. But if we're going to vote on this, I might not be able to vote on this.
Okay. Your Worship.
To be honest, I kind of would more support this one than the other one. I think that this is kind of unique, and they're just asking for the actual bicycles, are they not? So, what a great thing, right, in Turkey Point, and, there's all kinds of donations that go to cancer research from every different direction, but here's a unique situation for people that are actually in our community that can directly benefit from it. So I would be more inclined to support this than the previous one we just approved.
Okay. Inspector?
I was just going to comment, and the mayor beat me to it, that they're actually looking for a donation of the bikes, not any money per se. We do get quite a few bikes in. Not all of them are suitable for use, but we do currently have a couple that are unclaimed past their due date and are set to go to auction that would be suitable for this organization.
And Councillor Columbus did question you on numbers.
Yes, I think, and I don't, if I remember them correctly, I think last year we sent 88 bicycles to auction. From those 88 bicycles, I believe we were given $472. That is what was given back to us. The auction company keeps 50% of whatever they sell it for. So, but again, we're not talking bicycles that go to auction that are normally, a lot of them are just fit for scrap.
Yeah.
But they get rid of them.
Your worship.
So for 88 bicycles and $472, I mean, I almost wonder if they wouldn't be interested in taking all the bicycles and doing their own fundraising with it. I mean, if it's a cycling kind of,
I don't know anything about this organization.
like when you look at the amount of money that we're paying out to the auction company to be able to sell these off here, it's just kind of a win-win because they're getting the full amount from it.
David?
I tend to agree with the mayor, except for one thing. I think, Mr. Chair, I think the inspector said some of these bicycles are not up to refurbishing. Another aspect of this is a donation to the OPP, and some of these bikes, put them in shape, take them into a dealer, the ones that are probably fit for riding now, but give them a little tune-up, and then the liability would be, you wouldn't have any liability at all because they've been all refurbished. And so that's another aspect of making a donation if there's a refurbished charge before you turn them over to these kids.
Go ahead, Carol.
Well, the adults that are using these bikes to get back and forth to work, like these bikes are refurbished by this group, so they wouldn't need to be done by the OPP.
Suggestions on how you want to proceed? Should somebody from the board volunteer to find out more about what kind of bicycles they're looking for? Are they looking for all sizes? Are they looking for a specific age group?
Well, I could answer that question directly. The people that we support at the Norfolk Association for Community Living are adults, so it would be all adult-sized bikes that they're looking for to get back and forth to work and to get around the community.
Okay. How about I contact Emily Chanda, get a bit more detail, speak with the inspector about inventory and that kind of thing, and so that I can speak with some basis of knowledge when I talk to her, and bring it back on the 25th of this month when we're going to meet next, or 24th, whenever that is, 25th. Is that all right, Joe?
Yeah, that's fine. Inventory-wise, it comes up and down, and,
Yep.
Whether, I know that when this letter was given to me, I talked to the property manager, and we had a couple bikes at that time that would be suitable. A lot of them, I'm sure, are well past being refurbished, but there's a couple.
Okay.
I'm not sure you'd want our whole inventory.
Okay, I'll take it on myself over the next period of time to talk to Emily.
The event, though, is on September 15th, just to bring that to light.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. All right. I'll take
Okay.
that on myself. Go ahead, Your Worship.
Well, if it's on September the 15th, they want the bicycles before the event, is that? So would it be possible for us to make a motion for them to just go and check the inventory and see what bikes there are that might interest them and take the bikes?
They're property of the board, so.
Yep.
So could I
Do what
make a
you like.
motion then that the Paddle for Pedals group be invited to
Attend.
the police, the OPP station to
Is there a contact there?
review
Joe?
the inventory and select which bicycles?
Actually,
they want?
contact Staff Sergeant John Fashion.
John Fashion?
Arrange with the property.
Okay.
Yep, they're outside and stored in the sea container there.
So the mayor's made a motion to have
Paddle for
those
Pedals.
folks contact Staff Sergeant Fashing and hammer out some agreement. That'll take me off the hook, and I need a seconder for that motion. David? Carol says she's not going to vote because she's a participant in the program with Sue Knackle. Any further discussion? You all right with that, John? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. So we still have 20 minutes left, so we'll just skip over the monthly report for the moment and go to the misuse of 911 and the enforcement options. Inspector, is that yours?
So misuse of 911, I'm not sure where you're going with this. In order for a charge to be laid for misuse of 911, it has to be blatant and overt and basically harassing in nature. I only know of 2 times that we laid such a charge. To lay it because somebody calls in and complains about an Amber Alert, I don't believe any Crown attorney would prosecute that.
Yeah.
So,
So that was really the question, because every time there was an Amber Alert and your cell phone would go off beside your bed at 3 in the morning and wake you up, or it's somewhere else in the house and you say, oh, I'll forget it, and then 20 minutes later it comes back because you haven't acknowledged it or dealt with it. And then all of a sudden the media and the chatter around town is filled with this, fine them, deal with these sons of guns who are calling 911 for this abuse use. And so my question was to the inspector and his staff, can you do that? It's been verified that the use or misuse of 911 has to be blatant, repetitive, otherwise the Crown's just not going to proceed. So it's something that I guess is going to be with us for a while until the government makes some decision as to what to do on these kinds of issues, and the public reacts, I guess, as they have been, vehemently against these people that are complaining. Say, if it were your child, would you complain? Type of thing. Carol?
Well, just the thought, the alarm doesn't go off if the sound is turned off on your phone.
Mm. Yeah, you can turn it off. David?
Mr. Chair, they, being from over all these years, as the outsiders come in, and rightly so, retirees, they complain about the foghorn on a bad day, so the ships can make it ashore. So people complain about it.
Okay. Any further discussion on use and misuse, abuse of 911? I don't think we're ever going to deal effectively with the pocket dials and folks that are in an area where we can only identify the tower and not the actual location, those kinds of things. So we'll just move on with that. Check presentation. You want to do that, Inspector? $1833.91. Thank you. Moved by David, second by Carol. Police Services Board received 4 checks from the Police Auctions Canada in the amounts of $112.25, $109.51, $1,375.62, and $286.53, totaling $1,833.91. Discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Oops, sorry. And the Zone 4 meeting. What was the date on that again, coming up? Anyone remember? '24th? And that's the day that we want to meet here. Yep. Carol? No?
Able to make it that day.
Your worship? No? But we'll just skip this one. I won't be, we'll be here as a meeting, unless you're away, so you won't be here, so. Are you folks gonna go? Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm getting my 25th, yeah, I still won't be going. You're going though? Okay, if the board has anything, we'll give it to you and you can pass it along. You might want to have a conversation down there about false alarms as well. Yeah, okay. Then we can go to the, your report for the month, Inspector.
Yes, so after our last meeting before the summer break, you indicated that you wanted somewhat of a change in the report. I'm hoping that at this meeting, you'll give me some guidance on your want there. So basically, what I'm going to present with you is the standard report as it is now that all PSB boards should get. I can say that there is a committee that's being struck organizationally that's looking at changing what is being reported to the PSB boards. That's still in the works. Probably won't see that till mid next year. Yep. But anyhow, that's where we sit there. So I'll be reporting for July. August stats aren't available yet, so this will be for the month of July 2019. So overtime allotment per the contract, $387,628. Dollars spent to date, $116.80, which is 53.95% of our allotment budget, which is down from where we sat last year, 2018. Auxiliary policing hours for the month of July were 351. Crime Stoppers report. Activities for July 2019. So far, they've been 333 anonymous tips received. Year to date, since inception, charges laid 6,284 and 2,129 arrests. No student Crime Stoppers as they were out for the summer holidays. They've resumed this month again. Crime Stoppers participated, presented to or gave promotional items to the Cops for Cancer barbecue at the detachment. Gulf Committee and participated in Project En Route, which was to raise awareness about human trafficking. Conducted their usual media relations throughout the month. Fundraising on September the 7th, 9 till noon in Dunnville at the Erie Mutual parking lot. There's a shredding event for anybody who wants to get rid of documents. Golf tournament was held on August the 15th at the Pine Valley Golf Course. It was well attended, I believe, and I believe Staff Fashion here won a trophy for, what was it again?
Winning force.
The winning foursome. Nationally, internationally, they continue to carry out public awareness regards to human trafficking, counterfeit goods, contraband tobacco, and the board's still currently active seeking new members. Locally dedicated hours of overtime for the month of July, there is 1,126 for municipal and 346 under the provincial. And then if we go to page 32, the next few pages up to 36 are the standardized police service board report. So violent crime, obviously we've had no murders, no attempt murders, we had 6 sexual assaults, 21 assaults were up, no abductions, we had 2 robberies, and crimes against persons were at 6. Property crimes, overall year-to-date, property crimes are down 2.7%. Drugs, overall they're down about 33%. Year-to-date down 24%. A lot of that has to do with the legalization of cannabis. Our clearance rates, violent crime, we're at 57%. Property crime, we're at 15%. And overall, for 2019, we're up over last year about 2.8%. Year-to-date, though, we're down about 1.2%. Unfortunately, our no fatals for the year was broken. We had 1 fatal accident in July. We had 14 personal injury accidents, 60 property damage accidents. And overall, year-to-date, accidents are down about 8%. The fatal motor vehicle collision speed was determined to be a contributing factor to that. And on page 36 is the criminal code provincial statute charges laid as of June. So in June, all violations, 389 charges were laid. Year-to-date, 3,410, which is up slightly over last year. And then the chart below shows the breakdown of traffic-related charges. Just looking at the 5-year averages, which are the colored charts that we don't necessarily like, we do see a jump in property crime. However, that's typical for the summer, but it's within our projections. B&Es were up again. We always have a spike in the summer. Same with theft of motor vehicles. Still within projections. Impaired calls for services were up. We had more impaireds, but again, that's still within projections. The big jump, again, 911 calls, they're up again, but they've been up all year. On a positive note, our MHA calls are down. And again, if you want to have some discussion as to what specific you'd like to see over and above or in a different format, I would appreciate that.
Okay.
Questions, comments, concerns?
Questions, comments? David, Carol, Your Worship? Okay. With respect to, what we would like to see, what we need to see, I would suggest that we just hold that discussion until after we hear what council has to say about their priorities. And then we can have a discussion about internally at the PSB level on our policies, the strategic plan that we're obligated to prepare, revise, review, put it out there. Because certainly, decisions made should be evidence-based, and all of this feeds nicely into that. But I think once we have those policy, the strategic plan and the policies in place, then we should look at what stats support that type of approach.
That's fine. Moving forward, then I'll just stick with the standard 6-page PSB report, and we'll report on that until get further direction.
Appreciate that, Inspector. I see that our guests have arrived, which is great timing. And can we get some introductions and then move forward with the community policing, or sorry, municipal policing group? Yeah, just push the big button there.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay, and before you start, I'll introduce the Police Services Board to you.
Okay.
On your immediate right is Carol Greentree.
Carol, nice to meet you.
She's a provincially appointed member.
Okay.
David Murphy, also provincially appointed member.
Nice to meet you.
This is our recording secretary, administrative officer, Owen Jagger. This is her worship,
Morning.
the mayor of Norfolk County, Crystal Chop, and my name is Dennis Trevally. I was dragooned into this. No, I was elected into being the chair for this year.
Okay.
And as we know, the chair is re-elected or elected each year. Who do you have with you?
This is a colleague of mine, Linda Davis, and she'll be taking a few notes, and barring any questions that might have slipped my mind, I'm sure she'll be able to provide some input if required. So she's my backup, so to speak.
Okay.
So,
And just to confirm, there were some questions that were solicited from the board members.
That's
They were forwarded to you?
that's correct. Yes.
All right, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
so I've got those in front of me here, and what I'd like to do is maybe we'll just go through the presentation,
Yep.
and we'll cover those off at the end with barring any other questions. So.
Okay, and I did forget Councillor Van Passen sitting in the corner over there,
Counselor?
and the two media members behind you.
Bye.
And I don't know who that lady is over there. Oh, hey, fantastic.
Okay. Okay, well, good morning, Your Worship, members of council, ESB. My name is Sergeant Peter Marshall, as introduced before, and I'm a contract analyst with the Municipal Policing Bureau out of headquarters for the Ontario Provincial Police. And at the request of yourselves and the detached commander, I've come down here to give you an overview of the billing model. It's my understanding that got some relatively new elected positions, so the understanding may be at a minimum, I guess, just in regards to the billing model, not having any exposure in the past. So, so what I'll do is we'll do our best to explain it to you. It's rather complex. It's rather dry. I'm just going to ask you not to fall asleep while I do it. And any questions at the end, we'll discuss at that point in time. If there's something that comes up in the meantime and we can address it right away, then absolutely. Generally, more so than not, a lot of the questions tend to be answered further on throughout the presentation. So, so if that's the case, I'll just let you know that actually we're going to cover that off at another point in the presentation. What I've done is I've also provided you a hard copy of the slideshow. Just given the time of day, it's probably a good thing. It's tough to see the screen over there. So, so we'll move on. So just a little bit of a brief history of the billing model. So prior to 2015, billing to the OPP police municipalities were provided on an FTE basis. That's essentially you were billed for the bodies of the men and women within your local detachment. At that time, there's sort of a sense of ownership by the municipality for those men and women. However, the range of the billing ranged from anywhere from like $6 per property upwards of $850 and excessive of that, straight across the province. So the Auditor General sort of challenged to come up with a more equitable way of billing, and which brought us to the billing model to which we have today.
As a bit of history, I can tell you, myself and the Mayor of Cochrane, Peter Paulides, Mayor of the Day, right, we were chair and vice chair of the initiative for ASAP, the Affordable and Accountable Policing Program.
Oh, okay, perfect.
So
Perfect. So
Well,
you've got
the
some
other
history.
members are not familiar with what transpired. I certainly am.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. It's always good to have people there that have a little bit of a working knowledge of it and how we got to where we are today. Let me see if I can get this to. No, I don't think we're going to be. Yeah, it's not. Oh, status waiting for. Oh, there we go. Okay. Maybe easier just to follow along with the the hard copies in front of you possibly. It's up to you if you'd wish to do that. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe we're just getting some, yeah. Okay. Okay, so the billing model at this point in time, it only was only applied to municipalities that the OPP polices. It was not provided to municipalities that have their own policing service, and then came into effect on January 1st, 2015. Go to number 3. Seems to be slow. So maybe we'll just follow the hard copy that you have. So I'm on page number 3, billing model rationale. So the billing model, the billing model is based on the rationale that all OPP police municipalities should pay an equitable share for the provision of policing services. So if we go back when I was talking about the wide range from $6 to $800 and some odd dollars, $800 is very excessive for a municipality, for property owners to be paying for policing services. However, $6 you can't even start the car essentially for $6 per property. So,
If I interject as you go along, it's only because of some history, but 6 years ago, Norfolk County's bill was approaching $13 million.
okay.
This year, our bill is approaching $13 million.
Yeah.
So for those 5-6 years,
Yep.
we reap the benefit of the new billing
Oh,
system.
absolutely. Yep. And we've got I've got a little graph in there. I've done a comparison from 2014 as to where Norfolk was to where we are today. Okay, yeah, so going back, so no matter where the officer is located, it could be either rural, urban, Northern Ontario, Southern Ontario, there is a cost to having policing services delivered for any time of the day, any day of the week, 365 days of the year, and which obviously must come with the appropriate resources to provide those that service delivery. If we move on to the OPP billing model, this essentially shows you the diagram. It depicts the development of the billing model. So the first, I always call it sort of it's like a broom, essentially. So in 2014, you can see such the wide spread of where municipalities were when they were paying their billing to the OPP under the old FTE model. When the billing model was brought into effect in 2015, it pulled everybody right together and has maintained within about $68 per property difference over the course of the last 5 years, just no fluctuation. It's maintained a relatively steady rate of an average across the province. So in the development of it, underneath the billing model, just in the center diagram there, it shows the deep roots of how the billing model was developed and the consultations that we had within internal stakeholders and outside stakeholders of the OPP to get the input of all the municipalities and all the resources or the stakeholders that are required to have an effect of the billing of the OPP so that it affords a more transparent way of billing. People have their input or municipalities have their input, and so we could develop the billing model around all of that. And in the far left, he says this before, we had some external stakeholders that we reached out to, it was by way of conferences or webinars. We had meetings, even just our website that would provide details into that. Again, it's to maintain the transparency. The billing model is made up of essentially 3 components. You've got your base model, or your base service, your calls for service, and your additional costs. The base service is a cost right now. It's approximately $189 per property, and it is the same amount in your municipality as it is up in Red Lake, as it is over in Hawkesbury. Every municipality pays $189 per property. What the base model covers, it covers the proactive side. It covers any legislative activities that the OPP is mandated to provide. It puts the boots in the ground, it puts the detachment in the area, and outfits that detachment. Essentially, it provides the tools and the resources for the OPP to go out and start providing a calls for service, to get out there and provide the services that you're expecting or you're requesting or that are needed within the municipality itself.
And that number is affected by annual increases, those types of things?
Absolutely. So, your salaries will have that, any vacation. So they're taking all the stats annually based on, monthly. Our financial audit team will take the numbers of officers working within the detachment and then incorporate that into the averaged annual amount of hours worked, along with the adjustment in salaries and that sort of thing. And that makes up what a few other items here or there, obviously, but that makes up the base model itself, or the base service, sorry. So when we get to the calls for service, the calls for service is essentially where you see the difference from municipality to municipality. And just like the billing model is based on a 4-year rolling average. Again, the average is put into place so it provides a more balanced billing. So if you happen to have a spike in calls for service this year, for example, you may go through the month of July where all of a sudden you've got certain events taking place, or you've got 2 or 3 homicides going, or a bunch of break and enters, this sort of thing. All of a sudden you have this huge spike. However, the year prior you've done your budgeting to a certain allotment of money. And what the average does is that it does take all those calls for service, but it averages them into the prior 3 years as well. And it tends to kind of soften that the annual billing that you will receive for that current year as it's built in the other calls for service, and you can maintain the budget you put aside. So when we give you your estimate in the fall, and then you get the following year, you get your bill, and there's reconciliation built in from 2 years prior. We get into that later on. But it tends to fall more in line with what you've budgeted for your policing services.
Do you mind questions as we go along?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So on the calls for service, one of the questions we had was, why isn't it on actuals?
Well, essentially, you're being, so that comes back to what I was talking before. So you are being billed for actuals, right? So all your calls for service come in, and they're accumulated into a provincial total, essentially, right? And there's a percentage drawn out as to what your percentage of that is. But those actual calls for service are applied, but they're built in with that rolling average. So you've got the 3 years prior to that, right? So it's not, if you're to do it just based on your actuals, that's where you're going to see these spikes, right? It's almost like looking at a cardiogram, essentially, right, of the ups and downs. So your calls for service are based on actual data that comes in, but it's rolled into to a 4-year rolling average.
So where's the incentive for us to reduce the calls for service if I don't see the actuals?
Well, you get the actual, so if you look in, when you get your billing statement at the end of the
Yeah.
year, right? And I've got a copy of yours in here, but in your billing statement, with about 4 or 5 pages, I believe, there's all that information that's located in there. So out of the 9 billable calls for service, right, it's broken down into where all of those are, right? So you can have a look at what your calls for service are, but if you're looking as to where to make these improvements, right, well, we have a spike in this, we have a spike in that. Well, and this is where the consultation with the local detachment commander, when you're meeting with your PSB and you have your PSB reports, you can look at, as the inspector was saying here earlier, yeah, we've, maybe a slight increase here, but, good news, we've got a decrease in the mental health side of things, right? And so to decrease those calls for service, or within your municipality, that's where the cooperation between the municipality, your PSB, and your detached commander, and any other stakeholders that may apply. So you could have, if it's mental health, you might have your local health unit, for example, right? And if it's something that seems to be an evident problem, I say problem, but matter that needs to be addressed, such as just say mental health, well then, you have a situation table put together where, okay, what can we do to maybe address this and decrease the calls for service in this area, right? But it does take that, and this is something that I've always said in every presentation, that it does take that cooperation with everybody in the room, not solely relying on one specific entity to take care of the problem all amongst themselves. And because as from the police side of things, we respond to the calls for service. However, when required, but if there is no need for police to come because that mental health situation is not a police matter, right? Or the person who's drifted into town because he's homeless, it doesn't make it a police matter, right?
Yeah, well,
and unfortunately, some people, and I'm not saying anything about this, council here by any means, but sometimes there is that misconception that the OPP should be responsible for taking care of all these problems, and that's it, right? And we can go on our day.
Well, there are two areas that particularly I'm interested in, and I'm trying to get the board very enthused in, and I do see some traction, and council, and one of them is bylaw responses. And
Bylaw?
Bylaw.
Yeah,
And
we
fractions.
yep.
In Norfolk County, you have a bylaw division, you should be taking care of your bylaws, because why would you want a very dedicated, well-trained officer, paid what they're paid, responding to a raccoon call, type of thing.
Yep.
And I know Councillor Van Passen's viewpoint on that, but so if we can stop the police from going to bylaw calls, those calls for service drop off.
Yep.
Dedicate the resource to something more important and higher priority.
Yep.
The other area, we had this presentation before you arrived, and that is on false alarms, burglar alarms. 97% of burglar alarms are false. Why are we even going? So using the model from Toronto and Hamilton and Guelph at the present time, but certainly Hamilton and Toronto, responding only to verified alarms.
Yep.
Putting the onus on the monitoring station. So those are two areas that I'm going to be focused on, and hopefully the board will be focused on over the next period of
Yeah,
time.
absolutely, and especially when you can recognize that there are some areas that maybe need some kind of some correction, and what can we do as a community as a whole to remedy that problem, right, or those matters, and that's what it does take. It takes the community as a whole to take care of those, right? And in regards to your bylaw, I know it was an area that I was going to cover off, but if we've kind of taking that road here right now. I mean, when it comes to the contract and bylaw enforcement, so the contracts don't specify specific bylaws. The contract says that a detached commander and a municipality may enter into an agreement to enforce specific bylaws. So if you mentioned the one like a raccoon call, if that's not a matter of of what the OPP has agreed to, then it's one that would be taken care of by your bylaw officer. And, or there's the agreements you make that there may be specific bylaws, say noise complaints, for example, that maybe your bylaw officer is not working during those hours, and it's agreed upon that the OPP would respond. Right? Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, you may find that by assessing the statistics that come in from, say, that year, and the calls for service that the OPP responds to, and from a bylaw standpoint, and what your current bylaw officer responds to, you may find that from a financial standpoint, it's going to be cheaper to have that bylaw officer take care of all those calls for service, right, while developing a plan outside of those hours.
Certainly the costing model I'm working on to make the case.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. So we talked about the base service, we talked about the calls for service, and so you have your additional costs, and these are the ones that are over and above. So overtime costs are incurred as a result of specific investigations that may take place within the municipality, and so you'll be billed for those circumstances. If it comes down to a case of where operationally, overtime is accrued as a result of, maybe a member is off sick and they have to call somebody in for some overtime. Those are not, that is not a component that's billed back to the municipality. That is one that the OPP will absorb themselves. So the overtime that you folks are billed for just essentially calls for service or overtime that is related to a specific call for service. Court security, cleaning and caretakers, unless the municipality has provided a facility or owns facility, if it's a shared facility amongst other areas that is not owned by the municipality, then there's a cleaning or caretaking cost that is associated to that.
Right now, under the Police Services Act, court security is included in what we pay for
That's
at
right.
the municipality level. When I read the new pending legislation, I don't see court security in there.
Yeah, and I know that was a question that was brought up. So I think there may be a misinterpretation of what the act is implying, where what it's implying or what it's providing is the direction of having that court security delivered to the municipality or to that courthouse. So the policing service that is responsible for that jurisdictional area, whether it's, say, the OPP or a municipal service, they are to provide the court security for that facility. It does not address the actual billing. The billing is still a responsibility of the municipality. And however, the details, so that's how the act reads at this point. However, the regulations are not put in place yet. Yep. So, and you're probably, as any questions that come that are related to the new act, we aren't even in a position at this point where we can even provide you with a meaningful response, because with the regulations not being enacted yet, we don't know how that is going to come into play. So we're sort of out of the loop just as much as the municipalities are until that comes into effect. They're looking at possibly either late 2020 or early 2021 for the regulations to be passed. So until then, the OPP just maintaining status quo as we have underneath the old Police Services Act until that comes into play. And that's part of our bureau as to the messaging that and presentations that we'll be developing in the meantime, so that when the new act does come out, that we can ensure that we get our municipalities and our detachment commanders and our PSBs all up to speed on how the process is going to take place.
Is it the municipality's call as to the level of security provided in the court? Or is it local detachment who determines that? Or is it the court who determines what security level they want?
Well, it's all based on the... Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that? Yep. Okay. We'll have to dig into that deeper, because some of the communications I've had with other jurisdictions, we have a higher level of security here for some reason than they do. But that's,
Yeah, well, and I guess it depends on what is being required at that particular time, right? So. Okay. So if we go on to the next slide there, the billing model 2020 or 2019. So earlier I had mentioned that our costs are estimated, as I said before, it's in the fall, and the statements are delivered for the upcoming year. I just want to share how we accomplish or put this data together. With the data from our daily activity reporting system, so at the end of each shift, each officer is required to provide or sort of input onto our daily activity reporting system essentially what they did all day. So what calls for service they answered, and how many or what was the length of time required for that call for service. So, and then we'll determine how many FTEs, both civilian uniform, are provided the service to the municipalities, and from our detachment as well. So, and this is calculated by the number of hours worked, as I was just mentioning before, by the uniformed OPP officers, but excludes the provincial work that is mandated, or that the OPP is mandated to provide. So, the OPPs, like the officers you receive, they're not municipal officers, not provincial officers. They work together as just a uniformed officer that responds to call for service for both provincial components and municipal components. So the provincial side of things, as I said before, as the information is recorded into our daily activity report, that is extracted, and then we take the municipal side, the billable calls for service, and then apply that to our billing rationale.
Just to be clear on the provincial side of the equation, so a call for service to a provincial park.
Yep.
We're not billed for that.
Not billed for.
Call for service for a boat out in the water. We're not billed for that.
No, not in the water.
Okay. On a provincial highway, we're not billed for that.
That's right.
Okay.
So any,
There are separate codes for those things?
there's always, oh yeah, there's absolutely separate codes. Any land that is encompassed within the municipality that is not, say, a provincial highway, that is not a provincial park, is essentially part of that municipality, right? And so that could be a body of water, but there's a piece of land within that body of water that is still within the municipal boundaries that is still considered part of that municipality, as long as it's not a park. It's not out in the open water, this sort of thing. So the cost for employees is then determined by a weighted average salary for each rank and civilian role. So this is where we discussed before when it came to the base model, that we look at the salaries and those are adjusted on an annual basis. For support staff and other direct operating expenses, a fee per uniform FTE is then applied. And then it's multiplied by the provincial municipal number of uniform FTEs, and the provincial component is again removed from this total. So as I was saying before, when it comes to the officers and keeping track of the hours, so the Municipal Policing Bureau, we receive monthly updates from each detachment on how many officers were off or were working. These numbers are tallied together to establish the total provincial average, and then the provincial component is then removed, resulting in the provincial municipal number of uniform FTEs. That the other direct operating expenses is applied to the total, resulting in a billing figure. So as we move on to the next slide, so, and again, what you're looking at here is it's just a fictitious bill. It doesn't apply to any municipality, just so we can clarify that. Once these calculations are added, this gives us the amount of money that we estimate to recover from our municipalities based on previous activity. So this is where, again, the rolling average comes into play, and we can provide a more equitable estimate, or a more fair estimate. So for 2019, we calculated that we'd recover approximately $372 million for municipal policing. To split this value into categories of the base and the calls for service, that we determined using, using the data entered in by the members into our daily activity reporting system, how much time is spent on base activities versus the amount of time is spent on calls for service. So again, when each officer puts that information into their daily activity report, there's specific codes used, and those then codes are extracted, and that tends to pull, or that will pull away what is covered under the base and what is covered under the calls for service. For 2019, the split is 56.2% for base services and 43.8% for calls for service, at which point we then apply this split to the amount. So if we move on to the next page, so with the billing model, again, we're going to recover 56.2% through the base, which amounts to approximately $216 million. And this is then again split with amongst the municipalities. To determine the base per property, we simply divide this amount by the total amount of properties in all of our municipalities. The property count that we receive is based on MPAC, the most current annual update from MPAC. We don't come up with the amount ourselves, and we base it on that amount there. So currently, if you're dividing that 216 million by approximately 1.140 million properties across the province, that equates to the $189.54 that each municipality will pay for the base service. And again, it's the exact same straight across the board for every municipality. The remaining 43.8% recover through calls for service. And so to rephrase, in 2019, $156 million is to be recovered through the calls for service. So we're just going to go back to the base model, and just to show you how that it would appear on your billing statement. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to follow this one at the same time there, just making sure it's up there. So the base service category, again, as I mentioned before, it covers off proactive policing, general and directed patrols, your crime prevention, administrative duties, training, and essentially it covers the existence of your local police officers in the detachment, the legislated and the proactive duties that they perform, and the resources and training that they require to perform all of those duties. The number of properties is sourced, as I said before, by MPAC, or the Municipal Properties Assessment Corporation, and it's updated annually. And going back to, again, the base service cost, $189.54 per property.
Through the chair, we're billed cost per household, right?
Well, it's cost per property.
Per property.
Yeah.
And the previous cost per property versus the cost per property now?
Previous as in?
In the last contract, the one we're under now. What was our cost?
Well, the cost per property, though, I mean, I'll get to the comparison later on that I had for 2014. However, your cost per property fluctuates every year, right? So, because again, based on, so it's not a contractual amount. You know, today we're going to say I'm going to set a contract amount of $189, and that's what you'll pay throughout the contract, right? The amount per property fluctuates every year, and that's based on the way the billing model works under the averages, essentially, right? So for the base model, as I was explaining before, we've got, we take into effect the salaries, the hours that officers had worked through the course of the year, and we take all of these little items. Those are based in, or rolled into a provincial average, which again comes to the $189. And so next year you'll see the $189 change to maybe 188, maybe 190, right? It just fluctuates every year. But again, that's the same amount that every municipality across the province pays. But where you were back in 2014, and a few more slides, I'll be able to show you that little bit of a difference. But the contract doesn't cover a contractual specific or specified amount. It's the billing model is based on the averages, and that changes every year. So.
It's also important to note that on the issue of fluctuation, that there are certain properties that are not included in the mix.
Yep, absolutely, and we'll get into those properties there.
And certainly MPAC will not have account for new development until such time as occupancy permits are issued, you know that kind of thing. So it will fluctuate. All of a sudden you might see a spike. Well, this whole subdivision came online at that point.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily, I mean, so you'll have a spike in population, which means now your tax base has grown a little bit, and you might see a decrease. Who knows, right? And it's not necessarily mean that just because you have more people coming into your area that you're going to have more billable calls for service, right? It's just all based on it's sort of a situational situation that how the billing works out, whether there's an influx in population or not. So if we move on to the sample billing statement, so underneath the property counts. So just to kind of simplify the cost per property amount, if you look at a total cost of $942,000, I believe is what that is. or approximately thereof, and you're going to divide that by the amount of total properties within a specific municipality, and then it'll equal out to the cost per properties there. So calls for service. So the calls for service costs represent the municipal cost related to policing service that are typically reactive in nature. The municipality pays a proportionate share of the total cost of municipal calls calculated for the province. So as I was stating before, you're going to recover approximately, or the OPP is going to recover approximately 156 million for calls for service. So the price tag for all municipal calls for service is $156 million. Each municipality's 4 years of reactive calls for service, so this goes back to the rolling average, it's based on 4 years of data. They're included in an average to determine what you would see in column A. So if you look at the calls for service count, you'll see we have 2014, 15, 16, and 17. Each one represents the average calls for each year, and at the end we receive, in column A, a 4-year average of 29 calls for service. So the OPP chose to go with a 4-year average as opposed to a calls for in a single year to help mitigate, and this comes back to the question that you had posed to me before, to help mitigate any extreme fluctuations in calls, either up or down, that could occur any given year. So as I said before, it tends to soften the billing through the course of the year. It's still based on actual information, but it helps the municipality maintain the budget set aside for policing costs. Some calls may take longer to deal with than others. We've grouped our reactive calls for service into 9 groups, and they're called billing working groups, or work groups, sorry. Each work group has a time standard that represents the average time required to deal with these types of calls for service from start until finish. The time standards are reflected in column B, and these time standards are determined from our daily activity reporting system that are updated annually. So again, I could go to a break and enter, and once I get there, you may have that investigation concluded within an hour, or you may have a more complex break and enter that may take 10, 12 hours. There may be a couple of days involved. It just depends on the complexity of the investigation, which again is why working with the averages, it brings everything together, the lesser amounts, the greater amounts, to come to a median that works out, that's beneficial to all municipalities or to all people involved. The average number of calls are then multiplied by the time standard to determine the total weighted time, as shown in column C. The municipality's percentage is calculated from the total weighted time of all municipalities. So in this one here for drug possession, out of all the municipalities across the province, this municipality's percentage is 0.0092, I believe. Pretty small writing on here. And then included on each municipality's billing statement is a comprehensive list of the types of reactive calls in their area. So when this comes back to when I was explaining before that when we were discussing why this is not based on actuals, the information is provided in your annual billing statement of the calls for service that were responded to within your municipality. So if we go back to the sample billing statement, the next item, it reflects the calls for service and the municipality's percentage of all municipal workload. To calculate this cost per property, we simply divide the 781,000 by the number of properties in your municipality. And then that provides you with the your billing or your averaged per property number or amount. So if we go to the following page, we've got a base and a calls for service cost comparison from 2015 to 2019. And so it shows the last 5 years of our billing model. The amount recovered through the base services is represented in blue. The base services cost per property for each year is represented by the black line through the middle, and the amount recovered from calls for service in the green. Overall, the billing model has proven to be very stable when it comes to billing for municipalities. So the black line is very important. That represents the OPP's average cost per property. And as I was explaining to you before, the fluctuation is very stable. It's not. Sorry, that's the base cost. Sorry, the average calls for service though. Right now we're 359, and I believe we average between 354 to 359 is the average OPP cost for service or cost per property. Sorry. But the black line does represent, so you're still within $10, essentially $11 over the last 5 years for the base costs. So earlier there we were discussing the additional costs components, and so there's actually 5 areas. I've listed 3 here. The overtime costs. Municipalities are billed for overtime. Pardon me. Resulting from occurrences in their geographic area. An average from previous years is used as an estimate. Overtime recovery is limited to municipal detachment staff and not our investigative specialists from regional or general headquarters. So again, it's not bringing in that criminal investigation branch team to conduct a homicide investigation. That's all covered underneath the provincial component. You're paying for any overtime costs related to the members from that detachment that are incurred, the overtime hours that are incurred as a result of that specific investigation. Court security would be applicable to any municipality that has a court system or a courthouse within their jurisdictional area. It's based on the cost of the staff in the detachment area required to provide designated court security activities. 2019 costs are based on 2017 activity and would be reconciled to the actual at the end of the billing period. Prisoner transportation costs are allocated to municipalities on a per property basis. It represents the cost of staff providing prisoner transport services across the province. A standard per property cost has been calculated based on 2017 activities. You're looking at approximately $2.27 per property, and these costs will be reconciled to actual 2019 costs at the end of the billing period. The other 2 components that are not listed are the accommodations and cleaning, which we spoke to briefly before in regards to facilities and within the municipal area that house the OPP personnel, and for enhancements. Enhancements being, if we come back to, we were discussing earlier about maybe addressing specific or coming up with specific strategies to address matters within the community, albeit there's, for example, maybe increased police presence within schools or within the community itself as far as like a community policing officer, so to speak. And the municipality feels that there is a direct need or an absolute need to have an officer directed for that one specific role. And that's what the officer enhancement is to address a specific role. And so the municipality would put together, very briefly, a business plan that would go through the detached commander. And then it goes to, in this case here, it'd be our West Region headquarters in London, where there's a steering committee put in place, and they will review that request or that application, and whether it would gain their support or they don't see the need for it. The reasoning it goes in front of the steering committee is an enhancement is brought on by the municipality as they see it being a need. However, a year down the road, they may just say, we don't need this officer anymore. We thought we did, we were wrong. So we're just going to give you your notice that we're going to cancel the enhancement. Well, now the OPP is left with an FTE that they will have to financially be responsible for. So they need to make sure that if they go ahead with this enhancement, that provisions have been put in place to address the cancellation, the possible cancellation of an enhancement. So, what they can do with that extra FTE. So it has to be assessed by everybody. The need has to be shown, and then if it's approved on all fronts, then the municipality gets that enhancement for that specific role. Right. So it could be an admin sergeant. It could be, as I said before, it could be a community policing officer. It could be a high school officer, like high school resource officer, and that would be their one specific role. They wouldn't be going into the detachment and then their platoon sergeant saying, okay, you're going to take some calls for service today. Well, no, that's not. You're paying for that officer to do that specific role, right? Now, if a situation came up where an officer had to respond to something for a call for service, all the other officers are tied up on another investigation, and it is one that requires an immediate response, then the officer would go to that call for service. However, going back to our daily activity report, that would be an amount that would be extracted from the costs, right? And that call for service, billed back to the municipality if it's a billable call for service, but for the amount that you're paying for that, the reconciliation would come into play, and you'd not be charged paying. You wouldn't be essentially double dipping. You wouldn't be paying for that the salary for that officer along with that call for service here as well, right? That goes outside of the scope of what that officer is responding to. Okay? But they respond to calls for service that fall underneath their designated role.
Quick question on calls for service, and any particular day, we would have to call in somebody from Haldimand or Oxford?
Yep.
Are we then charged for those calls for service, or?
If it's a call for service within your municipality, then yeah, you're going to be billed for that call for service, because when they go back and do their daily activity report, right, they're going to enter in what they did. They're going to enter in the obligated duty codes, and then when we extract all of that information, then it comes back here. So it doesn't come back. Doesn't matter. You could have a constable from Red Lake who may be traveling through, and this comes down to our closest to the call program that we have in place and the integrated service delivery model that the OPP follows. But you could have an officer from Red Lake traveling through the area in a marked vehicle with the radio on, and all of a sudden a call for service comes up, and there's no other officers available. The provincial communications center, like each vehicle is GPSed, so we know where every vehicle is within the province. And so they may say, okay, here's someone coming through, so they'll actually get hold of that vehicle there saying, listen, I know you're heading here, but we need you to respond to this specific investigation over here, because we have nobody else that can respond to it. Well, the integrated service delivery model allows for the sharing of the resources, right? So, and that goes outside. So you may have a call for service that comes in, and or that comes into your municipality. But again, if we go back to talking about these spikes in calls for service throughout the year, this could be a particular day where you've all of a sudden have a huge spike in calls for service. Your officers are tied up, but we need somebody to respond because it's a domestic dispute, for example, which is it's a call for service that we don't waste any time getting to. Like we attend those calls. So we will bring in another officer from, say, Haldimand, if they happen to be close by. If they're the closest one there, they'll come in, take care of that call for service, and then move on if once a call is completed, or once these other officers are freed up and they can assume the investigative role. They will go back to their area. But it's the same, it can go the same the other way. Haldimand may be experiencing the same problem. You may have an officer from within your jurisdictional area here that is closest to that call for service, and they're required to go over there and address that. Right? Because in the end, it's our responsibility, and obviously the municipality's responsibility under Section 4 of the PSA currently, to provide that adequate and effective policing. And so we provide that adequate and effective policing in every manner that's available to us, every resource that's available to us, right? so that we ensure that we are answering our calls for service to ensure the safety of the public, and that we're getting there and taking care of the that certain situation or that unfortunate situation in that person's day. Okay, so if we go back to our fictitious statement here, and so we look at these additional costs and components. That's okay. They all appear in the bottom, and it gives you an example of how they're being billed. So again, it's based on the a cost per property amount, in which again will fluctuate over every year as the averages roll out. So please keep in mind that while some components like the prisoner transport and the accommodation and cleaning costs are per property rates, say $2.27 and $4.90. These other costs per property have been allocated by dividing the total costs for line items by the number of properties. We just simply do this to determine the cost per property. So on the next slide, so the 2019 OPP municipal cost recovery, to kind of simplify everything and put it into a pyramid, the base is generally going to be your largest amount. It's the boots on the ground. It puts the men and women in the detachments. It puts the detachments in place. And that makes up the base of all cost recovery. And as I said before, currently it's $189.54 per property for 2019. So the next one we'll move on to is $156 million, which is your calls for service cost. And again, charged municipalities according to their usage. So there's a percentage that out of the total pie of the provincial total, will extract your percentage of that for your calls for service. And then, of course, all of the other calls, or costs, that we spoke of before. So again, it's your overtime, your court security, prisoner transport, accommodation, cleaning, and enhancements if you have them.
Is there a corporate review periodically or ongoing relative to calls for service? What they are, break them out in terms of its bylaw, which is a municipal responsibility, versus health-related issues. There's more and more a push to put boxes around these types of things and say, well, as you've indicated earlier, a health call isn't necessarily a police call. A homelessness call isn't necessarily a police call, although police may attend, in a lot of cases do attend, at the request of EMS or somebody else. So is there analysis taking place at the corporate level on these types of things?
I want to let Linda answer that because she's been dealing with this quite regularly or frequently, actually. So,
Because I look at the chart and it's an upward climb.
Corporately, we wouldn't normally look at that. That's more specific to each individual area, specifically because it will be influenced by each individual area. So the detachment commanders would look at that. However, at the same time, when you see situations like mental health calls increasing across the entire province, there will be attention given to that, and that's where programs like the community mobilization program and situation tables will get introduced and shared corporately, but basically more directed for each individual municipality.
Okay, because as I look to the future, and we talk about harm reduction and all these other things, we see the council will give us their priorities, and that should be updated regularly as things shift. Then we have the legislation which will impose upon us the PSB policing policies and a strategic plan. And then we see the community safety and wellness plan, which must be in place, which we will play a small part in. I don't see us leading that charge. That's a corporate municipal challenge that they have to do. But if I read the tea leaves, and all of my experience in this field, I see a casual shift in, away from the beat cop, to use a vernacular, to a more nuanced, professional approach to wellness in the community. Do you see that happening? And this is why my question about corporate review. I mean, I need to have the confidence that at the corporate level, the OPP is looking at these trends and what's transpiring for the future.
It's hard to rationalize provincially. If it is affected provincially, yes, it will happen, but it's more effective. And as with the community safety and well-being plans, those are more dedicated to the municipality themselves. So it's more important to focus on what's happening in the municipality within itself, along with the detachment commander. The detachment commander has the resources at a corporate level, should he or she need additional input to address those situations. But what's happening in one municipality is not necessarily what's happening in a different municipality. And we find the variations between southern and northern Ontario will be vastly different.
Oh, I understand that, as well as for Indigenous and other territories. When I'm looking to the future, I don't want to find Norfolk County and the PSB at loggerheads or butting heads with corporate OPP on certain things that we want to have happen here in our municipality. And say, well, no, we can't do that because we have a corporate structure that does this, that, and the other. Whoa. We're contracting your service.
Essentially, your detachment commander is your chief of police.
Yeah, I understand that.
And although they still report to the commissioner, they are also at the municipality's beck and call for their priorities and interests. And also in your situation, it's the police service board that will direct their objectives and priorities, not our commissioner.
Yeah, okay, great.
Oh, no, that's fine. Okay, so the next slide is just a OPP municipal policing snapshot. This is from 2014 until 2019. So it shows the total amount of money recovered each year from municipalities in the blue and what the average of cost per property has been each year. The average cost per property over the last 5 years has remained relatively stable, varying between $350 and $360 per property. So, and this goes back to my comments earlier in regards to the stability of the billing model and the average costs per property. Well, the stability, and it's exactly what the billing model was designed to do, right? To create that equitable billing. You know, obviously, and again, that's an average of all OPP police municipalities, right? So you're going to have some that are lower, you're going to have some that are higher. Right? So the next one, this is the Norfolk cost comparison from 2014 until 2019. So 2014, that was a renewal of the contract that is expiring today. However, at that point in time, you were still underneath the FTE billing model, at which point it came into effect in 2015, and then all municipalities across the province were rolled underneath that the new billing model. So if we look at Norfolk County, on a cost per property, you're around $445 per property back in 2014. The average for the OPP cost per property, $356. 2015, underneath the new billing model, you saw your cost drop to $409. 2016 dropped to $387. 2017, a slight increase to $391. 2018, and then approximately $410 in 2019. So it's starting to increase slowly. However, as I've said this to other municipalities in the past, much like anything else, you can go out and buy your loaf of bread this year, and next year it's going to be that much more, and then that much more, right? It's just the cost of living, the cost of growth. There's always going to be that percentage, and it even affects the policing world. However, we're still 5 years later, and we are still well below what the average cost the cost per property in Norfolk was back in 2014. So, and again, it's sort of a testament to the billing model and providing that more equitable billing. So rather than doing it on the FTE basis, we're doing the calls for service basis, and it provides a little more communication, I believe, a little more incentive, I guess, between the OPP and the municipalities to put in place some proactive strategies to combat identified areas that are problem areas within the municipality, with a target of, one, addressing the problems and rectifying what the problem is, but two, hopefully we can, it might have an effect on what the annual billing amount will be. So the property count used for the determination of the 2015 costs, for this example here, has been applied to 2014. So a reason, because the way we do the cost per property now compared to what it was in 2014 are different. So we just took 2015 numbers and applied those to 2014. So there'd be a little bit of a variation, but going on the billing statement from that time period, it's relatively accurate. And again, our property counts are all based on MPAC's numbers. They're not numbers that we come up with, and they're updated every year annually. The 2014 costs in here, because I thought I better explain all of this, so just so it's not like a bunch of numbers that were just thrown in there to make it look good. The 2014 costs are net of the detachment revenue and exclude any grants that the municipality may have received at that point in time. The 2015, 16, and 17, they are reconciled costs. And detachment revenue and grants have not been applied to these costs. But the total costs detailed in the annual billing statement excludes grants and detachment revenue. The government implemented a revenue neutral 5-year, so 2015 to 2019 phase-in strategy for the current billing model, resulting in a capped year-to-year municipal cost increases or in decreases. The strategy of the caps per property increases at $40 per property plus a cost growth amount to account for the differences in salary and benefit rates, support costs, and the other direct operating expenses, or the ODOE. So for the billing caps, as part of the implementation of the billing model, the government approved a phase-in strategy. The cost increases and decreases in policing bills. They may be capped for up to 5 years to implement the current model in a way that is manageable to the municipalities and has a neutral impact on provincial revenues. 2019 is the last year of the phase-in strategy, where the decrease or increase caps are applied. Caps on increases and decreases are applied on a per property basis. So increases for 2015 were capped at $40 per property. The years 2016 to 19 are capped at $40 per property plus a cost growth amount to account for differences, as I said before, in the salary benefits, benefit rates, support, and the ODOE. And for 2019, the cost growth amount is $10.31 per property. The cap for decreases are adjusted to ensure overall revenue neutrality. The capped per property cost decreases are $37.46 in 2015, $60.81 in 2016, $94 in 2017, $165.08 in 2018, and $3.05 in 2019. And we were talking about before, so we're talking about year-end adjustments, and this comes into by way of the adjustments for overtime, salary and benefit rates, court security, prisoner transport, enhancements. These are the additional costs. They are estimated in the annual billing statement, and then issued each year, or sorry, each fall for the following year. So in 2019, you'll receive the 2020 estimated billing statements. Adjustment for costs that are reconciled after the year of service is complete will be included as a prior year adjustment in the next annual billing statement issued. So for example, in 2019 year-end adjustments will be included in the 2021 billing statements. And the adjustments will be included in the annual billing statements and issued in the fall. So at this point, I will entertain any questions that people may have. So I don't know if you want to address I know we addressed a few of those questions that you presented to the inspector, or via the inspector to me. We can go
Most of
through
those
if
have
you
been
wish.
answered through your
Yes.
presentation and my interventions, or interventions from the board. Just to get the ball rolling, first of all, thank you very much for your presentation and your attendance this morning, both of you. As we move into November, December, and the contract negotiation, certainly finance is going to play a major role as we move forward. A question on your first slide, OPP municipal policing, and it talks about 326 municipalities. I know there are 444 municipalities in Ontario, so you're doing the bulk of the work for municipalities.
Yeah.
146 on contract and 179 on non-contract basis. Is the billing model the same for contract and non-contract?
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you very
straight
much.
across the board. There's no upper tier, there's no lower tier. The billing for a non-contract and for a contract is exactly the same. You're billed the same. The differences lie with the advantages or the opportunities that a contracted municipality has. So you have the formation of a PSB. You have the opportunity to provide policy, with cooperation with local detachment commander, and those strategies. You have the opportunities to take part in any grants that are available, or some grants that are available, and the complaints component of it, where you can see how the detachment commander deals with complaints, or when it comes to the complaints about officers, for that matter. So there's the advantage of having a PSB that, having a contract or a non-contract committee would not be able to engage in that. They can have a CPAC, which it's not mandated, it's not legislated. However, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a municipality that does not have, either a very organized CPAC or a loosely organized CPAC that the detachment commander would not participate in. Because again, it's all about transparency and it's all about accountability, and we like to ensure that our municipalities are kept up to date as much as we are, and we also invite that information to come in, because that's the only way you can provide a great policing services, by having those suggestions, that input come in, and maybe you're both meeting at the same level, maybe there's areas that need to be addressed, which is essentially what we're doing here today.
So the OPP budget, $1 billion plus?
1.1 billion, yes.
How much?
I think it's 1.1, I believe, this year.
1.1, yeah. And an officer costs what an officer costs, and subject to promotion or subject to annual increases, that type of thing. And when a constable or an officer is on duty, that individual gets a call and goes to a call for service. Now, we've already paid for the officer. So the question is, why are we paying addition for the call for service? Is it simply because of your budget that you got to make it up, or is there some other methodology there? If I have an officer on duty, why am I paying more for that officer to go to a domestic or something like that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I understand it. I'm just saying,
Yep.
it's a broader picture here.
I think it's important to realize that when we are, when When municipalities are billed for their police services, it's a cost recovery that we do. So our budget was, yes, $1.14 million, and that is for our officers that we have out there that need to be there regardless for their provincial mandate. The number of officers have increased for the amount of municipal policing that we do, but we're not necessarily funded for those positions. To recover the cost for those, we do the billing model, which is an estimated cost initially based on the daily activity report data that we have on the factual data. So you'll notice in some of the earlier slides, to determine how much we're going to recover, we estimate that amount by the amount of hours that have already been given to municipalities, and that's for municipal work that we would not otherwise be doing. So you're not necessarily paying for the provincial officers, you're paying for the services that are provided regardless of who's doing the work, whether it's a municipal officer or whether it's a provincial officer, because it's been very difficult for us over the last number of years, especially for municipalities that were policed by the OPP prior to 2015, where you had a level of service defined by the number of officers. We no longer provide that service based on the number of officers. We do it more on the level of activity and that base service rate, which is more for having the service available to you.
Okay. It's just, if I had a firefighter in the hall and the alarm went off and the firefighter went to the alarm, I'm not going to pay that firefighter anymore.
No, but that firefighter is working for the town only,
Yep.
and their responsibility is the town. On OPP is a provincial police force. We have a provincial mandate. Part of that includes the provincial parks, the highways, the non-municipal areas.
Which we don't pay for.
Pardon?
Which we don't pay for.
Correct, correct. So that's the other part of the budget.
Yep.
But for the amount of work that we are doing in municipalities, we need to recover the funds for that portion of work. You may not have X amount of officers in this area if we weren't policing that. We would only be filling our complement to what would be required for the provincial side.
It would make it pretty simple if you just got rid of the calls for service charge and just put it all on the property and have one bill, and there we go. That was just a comment. So as we drill down and we get to the contract renewals stage, which is coming up very shortly, and I look at it, and I've got all the material that was sent to us, and the previous treasurer shared it, so you have that as well. And I'm just looking over your shoulder, John. So as we go forward, there's not much negotiation really to take place other than what services, bylaws, if you wish, that we wish to have the OPP do. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So over to the mayor.
This is purely hypothetical. So in a hypothetical world, I mean, if you had two very rural municipalities that looked at combining police services, there would actually be no chance for any reduction in your costs based on this model.
No, this model would be, it's essentially, hypothetically, we would still determine a cost for this municipality and add the costs together. And it would not be any different.
Who determines where you have an OPP branch in each municipality, how big that municipality needs to be, or obviously you have an inspector in each one and so on and so forth, so some.
Okay, well, there's not necessarily an inspector in every one, but for the detachment locations, that's sort of been established for quite a long time due to our provincial mandate. Areas that we have to be in the province to fulfill our provincial mandate. So we sort of started with those detachments, and those are locations that we will work for our provincial mandate from. And then should a municipality contract with the OPP, it's still the municipality's responsibility to provide the accommodations or the building for us to work out of. In some cases, those municipalities don't. So that's when we use our existing building that is already there for provincial purposes, and the municipality will have to pay a rate for the accommodations.
So I don't want to go down the road and cause any more work than is necessary for anybody. The contract negotiation, and you've agreed, will focus on fundamentally what bylaws we want the OPP to enforce, if any. If there's no discussion around that, then let's sign the paper and move on. If I have a focus on cost containment, and I mentioned two areas, bylaw, which is a municipal responsibility, they make the bylaws, and get out of the false alarm business. So my calls for service drop off, but you still have to make up $1 billion plus. So my costs are not going to go down at all, are they?
It's not necessarily $1 billion plus that we have to make up. It's that cost recovery amount, which is approximately $400 million.
Yeah.
So in reality, and if you're still going to, our calls for service is going to make up a portion of that amount that we're recovering.
Yeah.
You're going to pay your percentage of that portion.
Yeah.
And even if your calls decrease, your percentage may be higher if everybody else decreased also.
Yeah, exactly.
You may have, you will be affected by what's happening around the province.
So if I agitate, as I've done in the past, and get the rural municipalities that use the OPP to adopt the false alarm policy, and the council passes the bylaw and says, you won't go to any more false alarms. You'll only go to verified alarms.
We can't, bylaw cannot dictate what the OPP will respond to or not.
No,
right?
no,
So,
I had this discussion earlier with the inspector. I'm saying, when the monitoring station calls, you go.
Yep.
If the monitoring station doesn't call, you don't go.
well, we'll respond to any call for service that we are requested to
That's right.
respond
So
to.
if we
So
shift-
if something happens that we don't know about, obviously we can't respond.
No,
to it. We don't
exactly.
know what's
So
happening,
we
right?
shift the liability and the responsibility to the monitoring station to verify the alarm before they dispatch. And this is what Toronto's
Well,
doing now and
yeah.
Hamilton is doing now, so there must have been a great legal debate about liability here. And there are others that are going to do it. So back to my point, if I agitate hard enough and get the rural municipalities to adopt the same policy, and then we can use the time and resources that have been misused to false alarms to more priority issues. But my calls for service will drop.
But you don't,
But my bill won't drop, right?
the time that you're spending on certain calls will drop also. There's no doubt that in several municipalities across the province that they have implemented false alarm policies of different types to try to limit the calls. And more often than not, I know in some municipal areas, they will charge the resident or business where the false alarm is, if they have X number of false
And
alarms.
we do that.
But that's more to recover your costs to put towards policing, so to
That's a huge
speak.
administrative back office operation. We're trying to get out of that business as much as possible. My point is, if we look at cost containment and we reduce our calls for service in Norfolk County, will that translate into a reduction in our bill? If not, why waste our time?
It may or may not. I can't say for sure that it will. It's a possibility. If all of the enforcement in the province was reduced and yours was reduced, you may very well see a savings.
Okay, so it would pay me then to go to the Association of PSBs and to CANASA and promote certain things to reduce calls for service. But you still have to make up your,
We can't.
tell
you still have to make
do
up
it or
your
not
billion
do it.
one
Like,
where you're
it's-
gonna get it.
It's not in our realm to tell you what you can and can't do when it comes to that.
Yeah.
That's entirely up to you, but just in regards to, we were speaking here before, I think as Linda said, it could fluctuate up or down.
Yep.
Right, so, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, your worship.
I'm kind of perplexed by all this, actually, because with a government that's looking at sort of, finding efficiencies and reducing costs. I mean, based on this model, there's absolutely no incentive that I see for a municipality to do anything. I mean, just sit back and give what's handed to you then, right?
I don't understand your question in terms of
Well, in terms of like, I see, our sort of Norfolk cost comparison, I mean, we're going up year over year. But what can we do then as a municipality to be able to reduce that OPP cost that's shifted to our taxpayers based on this model? Where it's an overall, so, like the chair said, if we reduce the number of calls for service, that doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things, right? It would be such a minimal impact that we would see.
We don't know for that for sure that it wouldn't reduce it. That's like I said, it's kind of unknown because what you're going to pay is you're going to pay a proportionate share of municipal workload. So that proportionate share may decrease, it may increase, but it also depends on how big of a pie or how much workload there is in general. So while you may be increasing workload here, other municipalities may be increasing workload, we can't determine that. But in order to make it a more equitable system throughout all of the municipalities that we police, the calls for service are going to be your proportionate share of the total calls for service. And there always an incentive to reduce that for the simple fact of adequacy, for the simple fact of community safety. There should always be the intention or the benefit to reduce calls for service.
Okay, let's see if I can be pretty clear. You need $1.1 billion on a budget. Notwithstanding, the province just said you lost 43 million or something, whatever the cut was. But, so you need $1.1 billion. And you're getting that from a variety of pools, one of them being the municipality policing, correct? You're not getting all the $1.1 billion from municipality policing.
No, we're
No.
not. And also, the $1.1 billion is not generating all of our provincial mandate either.
No, I'm saying, but that's your budget. So when I get down to the nitty-gritty little tiny municipality and say, oh, well, let's see if I can get rid of some of these irritant little calls for service so that I can have my professional folks available to respond to higher priority issues, mental health perhaps, whatever. Whatever work I do to reduce my calls for service, whatever work I do to reduce the calls for service across Ontario, such as a false alarm bylaw, really isn't going to impact us that much.
Financially, no, but in terms of your community safety, it will, and I think that overrides any financial cost.
I agree. There are disbenefits and there are other benefits, but I'm looking at cost containment at the moment. So I'm saying to myself, well, why would we even bother doing this if there's no reduction in costs? Then that's our ambition, is a reduction in costs. Is why I agitated 6 years or 7 years ago for this billing process.
Our focus is more community safety as opposed to the
Yeah.
costs associated to that. We
esoteric
have no
things.
choice but to provide the services for community safety.
Yeah, I understand that. But our chief of police, of course, is going to respond to the needs of council in the first instance, I would hope. Okay, and I don't want to get into an argument, but thank you very much for coming. Anything else from the board? Go ahead, David.
Yeah, thanks, through the chair. I'm a firm believer, I do believe if we reduce our cost for service, the officers will be put to much better use than raccoon calls and false alarms. But watching this billing service and listening to what's going on and listening to all the situations, I do believe that we are OPP billing service is no different than the education. I think you're going to hand us a bill in 3 years. We're not going to save anything. We can do some better policing by having our officers not chase raccoons and be on the street where they should be. But I've said for the last 2 years that your model, I don't see anything wrong with it except trying to reduce some costs, but it's very, very minimal. And I think from this point on, you're like the Board of Education, and I'm not saying that as a negative. You're going to hand us a bill every so many years.
I would say that that's correct.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much. And I guess if they're going to make any inroads whatsoever, it's going to be at Roma, OSUM, and AMO, and meeting the minister directly, as I've done, and as this great mayor is doing now and will continue to do. So it just, when you look at where the dollar is split in a municipality, and this is not a denigrating statement or anything else, it's just a fact that policing services is equal to infrastructure, or in some cases greater than infrastructure. And yet we have a huge infrastructure deficit. And so cost containment is an ambition. And we would hope that at the corporate level of OVP, you will partner with us and join in and try to look at that issue very much. Anything from you, Your Worship? David? Carol? Thank you very much. We'll talk. Okay, so at this point, if there's any other business that any member wants to bring forward before we go in camera, this is the opportunity to do that. Your Worship.
Thank you, sir. Well, now that I have a new assistant who's on the ball, I have a number of emails with some various issues. I don't know what would be better. Should I just provide them to you or provide them to the board?
Are they
Just specific
case issues or are they structural issues?
Specific case issues
Well,
throughout
then
the
I
county.
would suggest you just give
so-
them directly to the inspector.
Okay. So I'll just have a folder for you at every meeting then and all.
If it has something to do with how PSB operates or that type of thing, then we'll take it on. Or if it becomes a statistical.
No, they're specific, so we've got parking on Dover Beach, speeding and distracted driving on St. Andrews, motorcycles speeding and noise complaints on Radical Road between Nelson and Blue Line, intersection of
Yeah.
Forestry Farm and McDowell, break-ins, pellet guns, shooting at windows on Montclair.
Okay. Montclair's up here. Okay. Again, I will say to you and Councillor Van Passen, who's here, we're looking for your priorities. We're certainly looking to get the OPP out of bylaw issues as much as possible. I know that's going to be a journey that we're going to have to go through. Parking, yeah, give it to bylaw, that type of stuff. But hand it directly to the inspector, please, and he can kick back to us here if it's becoming an onerous issue. Anything else for the good of the board before we go in closed session? Yeah, that's my viewpoint. We'll negotiate it. Yeah. So moved by Carol, seconded by David, that the the Norfolk County Police Services Board does enter closed session at 11:30 a.m. to discuss operational matters pursuant to Section 25A and B of the Police Services Act, RSO 1990. All in favor? Thank you.